So for this week on CyberSchool, we're doing another one in our series of how to successfully integrate to a particular platform. And this week we're talking about 3CX, which is a very common phone system that you can use that can either be hosted locally, like we use at CyberData, or hosted in the cloud, which can be offered by a variety of resellers. It's a really popular platform because it doesn't usually charge for safe seat licenses. It's very easy to work with. It's kind of one of the softwares where you buy it, you get your version. If you need to buy extra seats, you pay a little bit more for some extra seats, and it's one-time fees, and you pay for an upgrade once a year. It's that style of software instead of, a fee once a month, which comes with its own costs and benefits. With 3CX, you have to do a lot more management, but it comes with less fees because you're not paying somebody else to do the management. And we use 3CX at CyberData. That's a regular phone system. If you've ever called into our support team, our sales team, or anybody else at CyberData, we use 3CX in the office. And we also use it as one of our main testing platforms when we're actually developing our firmware and going through QA testing. We do a lot with 3CX. We really use quite a bit of 3CX at CyberData. So let's talk a little bit about the platform and how to integrate our products with it. So to just, again, kind of talk about the platform, it's either locally hosted or privately hosted, meaning, it's not going to say, be hosted, by one of these big major companies. It's either, running locally on, say, a virtual machine at your location, or, say, like on a little Intel NUC, or a different device, and you can run it locally, or it can be, privately hosted in the cloud on, say, AWS, run by your, friendly neighborhood reseller, or what have you. It's kind of a private or local hosted platform instead of, say, something that's hosted by like 3CX themselves, although I do think they're starting to offer that now. The nice thing with it is you can go and host and control the server yourself, or just get the service from a reseller, kind of like you would with essentially like you would get with, say, RingCentral or Zoom, where you're getting it from somebody else and you're just paying them a monthly fee per seat, and you're really not having to deal with any of the phone system stuff. One of the nice benefits of 3CX is you can directly provision our products from 3CX, meaning you don't actually have to go and set up the products manually, although there are some caveats to that. We'll talk about that a bit briefly later. One of the nice features with 3CX, and one of the things that I really like about it, is it has a built-in paging feature where you can actually do paging directly through the platform, and you don't necessarily need a product, say, like our paging server, if you're using the 3CX platform. There are additional benefits to using a paging server, but if you're just looking for paging to your speakers, you can do that directly through 3CX, which is pretty trick, and not a lot of platforms actually support something like that. In addition to things that other platforms don't normally support, 3CX supports H.264 video, which means that you can actually use products like our video intercom with 3CX, which is really nice. And again, like I mentioned at the start of the call, we really develop our products on 3CX in terms of a lot of testing that we do locally. So, H.264 video works really well on the platform, and we've really vetted it on that particular platform. And as I mentioned, this is what we use for our regular phone system and what we test on internally. So of the platforms out there, our products are probably going to work the best on 3CX because we use it so much during development and just the regular use of our products at CyberData. So to just kind of talk about device requirements to use our products in the platform, the nice thing with 3CX is it doesn't have any specific transport protocol or audio encryption requirements or anything fancy like that. So just about any CyberData product will actually work on 3CX, which is really nice. So if you've got some of, say, our older V2 products, or heck, you've still got some of our old V1 outdoor intercoms from, the late 2000s, they'd probably still work on 3CX, which is a really nice thing. So that way you don't have to worry, oh, I've got one of the slightly older version of CyberData product that was end of life in like 2018. Is it going to work? It'll work on 3CX, which is really cool. And in most cases, you can directly provision our devices from 3CX. Of course, with the caveat that I mentioned on our last slide, is that remote or cloud-hosted provisioning through 3CX requires the use of either the STUN or the ICE protocol. And unfortunately, our devices don't support either. So if you're going to be using 3CX in a hosted environment, you're just going to have to manually provision them. Remote provisioning is not supported, unfortunately. This is something that will likely change in the future, but at the time of recording for this video, our devices aren't provisionable in a remote sense with 3CX. If you're using it on-premise, meaning you've got a virtual machine or a physical bit of hardware that's running 3CX, and the same LAN at the location, easy peasy. No problem doing that remote provisioning or that provisioning. But if you're doing it remote, say, and you just get a reseller and they're trying to set it up there, or you've got 3CX hosted on, say, AWS, unfortunately, you're going to have to manually configure the equipment. But with that said, manual configuration is probably the easiest as compared to any other platform. And my job is setting up our equipment on platforms, and 3CX is by far one of the easiest and one of the reasons that we use 3CX as a testing platform in CyberData. So let's talk about actually provisioning something if you're going to be provisioning one of the devices directly through 3CX. To actually provision something, first you need to create a user for the device. So that way 3CX can associate things like a name for that particular extension and an extension number. If you want, you can set up other things like, say, if the unit goes offline, you can have 3CX send an email to an email address, all that good stuff that you would kind of expect during a regular extension setup. But once you do that, you switch over to the phone provisioning tab, and there's a button that says add, and you can click that and you can get a big drop down list of all the different equipment that are provisionable through 3CX, and our products are on that list. And you can go and pick a template that's actually built into 3CX to automatically go and provision the device through 3CX, which makes it really a breeze to go and set everything up. And since our products kind of share a template, we've got the proverbial product family, especially with products like their SIP paging amplifiers or the loudspeaker amplifiers, or even the IP66 horns, they're all going to use the exact same template. But once you go and have the template all picked, you actually get a provisioning URL that you can use that basically tells the device where to go to get the particular file. And you can either set that up in your DHCP rules, so we'll automatically go and fetch that file from the server, or you can just input that into the auto provisioning server field on the particular CyberData device that you're setting up. Now, if you have to go for manual provisioning, say you're working with a remote hosted system, not a big deal. You're going to go through basically the same setup as you do for the actual auto provisioning method. You're going to go through and create that same user and set up all the same general settings as much as you want to fill out as necessary. And then on the phone provisioning tab, that same tab where you'll get that URL for the auto provisioning, you can just take the same credentials that would be put into that template and just put them manually into the device. It's really not that much work. So when you're setting up the CyberData device, you're going to set the primary SIP server or the Nightringer SIP server to the IP address or the FQDN, the fully qualified domain name of that particular server, whether it's hosted and it has an FQDN, or if it's local, or if you're just using an IP address, you set that as the SIP server field. The user ID is always just going to be the extension number of that user that you just created. For conversation's sake, we'll say it's extension 123. The auth ID in newer versions of 3CX is actually just a randomly generated string of characters, and you'll just want to copy and paste that into the authentication ID of the CyberData device, as goes for the auth password that's provided on 3CX, and that just goes, of course, in the authentication password of the CyberData device. And once you do that, that's all you need to set up for manual provisioning. You might have something like an outbound proxy or other things that are specifically required for your setup. But at the bare minimum, you just need those 4 credentials: the SIP server, the user ID, the auth ID, and the auth password. And in a bare setup, that's all you need. And the device will work on 3CX. So finally, let's talk about the paging group setup as we kind of wrap everything up here. The paging group setup is one of, I think, the big selling points and one of the cool features that I really like of 3CX. And it actually uses SIP-based paging instead of multicast, which is kind of the industry norm for doing paging. It's all going to be done via multicast, which has its limitations. And the cool thing with SIP-based paging is it does a one-to-many SIP call, kind of like a ring group where multiple phones are going to get the call, but only one can answer. Well, with a paging group setup, multiple phones, endpoints, speakers, what have you, are going to get this paging call, but they're all going to play the audio at the same time. So it uses that same kind of mindset as a ring group call where it's one to many, but instead of it being one to many and only one can answer, it's one to many and everybody gets that announcement. So it really helps, and that can help get the page, say, across different local area networks, which is a restriction that you can't really get around with multicast, which makes the paging group setup really, really beneficial. To set up a paging group, it's absolutely easy. You set it up as what they call a ring group, and instead of just your regular ring group, you pick a paging group, and you just set the name and the extension number for that particular group, whatever, phone number you want, and then you add all of the devices that you want to actually go and receive this particular page. And of course, all you have to do for this to work is register it with 3CX, because 3CX is making the calls. So as long as the products are already registered with 3CX, there's no additional settings or anything you would need to do on the CyberData device. You've already done it by registering it with 3CX. So finally, just to kind of summarize everything, 3CX is an awesome option for either on-prem or hosted phone service. It's a really good platform. It's got a lot of tricks and tricks that other platforms don't have. It might have, seen what 3CX did and kind of incorporated that into their platform. And our products are also provisionable in most scenarios. So if you're going to be using a lot of CyberData equipment for your paging needs or your access control needs, 3CX is an awesome platform to use because CyberData devices are so widely supported on the platform. And there's no specific device requirement. So if you've got an existing CyberData deployment and you're considering another phone platform to go for, but you've got some older CyberData speakers that still work, they'll work on 3CX no problem, which is a really nice benefit. And in terms of actually hosting your own 3CX system, it's going to run on most virtual machines. So if you've got your own dedicated server setup, throw it on there. Or if not, you can get basically a regular PC, from say Dell or what have you, and run it there. It runs on natively on Windows. It doesn't even have to be in a virtual machine. So that way you can run 3CX in just about any environment. And plus, the paging and H.264 support really makes it ideal for CyberData products because that's such kind of a niche thing in a lot of the industry where your big hosted provider giants don't really support H.264 video when it comes to a person-to-person call. They'll tote, oh, we support H.264 video, but only for group calls. We don't actually do it for all of the individual calls. Well, 3CX does and can still be hosted in the cloud. So you get all of that really cool stuff on a really, really good platform that, might actually be cheaper than other platforms. So it's definitely something to consider. A couple terms that I use today that I just briefly want to go over. Of course, H.264 video is a term that I threw around a little bit. That's just a particular transport codec that's used for the actual video that we use from the intercoms. And then we used both stun and ICE. Stun is the simple traversal of the user datagram protocol, or UDP, and that's just a way that a device can actually go and figure out how it can talk to a server. As is ICE, which is the interactive connectivity establishment, which is again just another way for two devices, a endpoint device like say a CyberData intercom and a server, to be able to figure out the best way to talk to each other.
Thank you for watching this edition of CyberSchool. If you have any questions, please get in contact with our sales department. They are available by email at sales@cyberdata.net or by phone at 831-373-2601 extension 334. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from CyberData.